So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Yael Cohn, and she's going to talk to us about homeschooling. She has two sons, Jacob and Maximus, and she's been a strong advocate in the search for a diagnosis and treatment and management and inclusion for Maximus. And she has worked closely alongside many different organisations to achieve this. So thanks, Yael, and we're ready for your presentation. And please think about your questions through the presentation and pop them in chat. Thank you.
Hi, this is Yael Cohn. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about homeschooling special needs. Thanks for joining me. So as an introduction, I just wanted to cover my position. I guess as a mother with a child with disability, I've been forced to think outside the box, to look at alternative measures to assist our son to learn, thrive and become more included in the community. Our aim was to help him overcome his anxiety and alleviate pressures wherever possible, and also challenge him in positive ways, to assist him to build confidence, to engage, participate and develop meaningful interests and relationships for a happy, independent life. The point is not so much how we came to the position of homeschooling, as this is an individual and different experience for all who make these choices in similar situations, but really more that we do the best we can with the situation and resources attainable to us to assist our son with his learning, and making the definitive choice to homeschool in itself is the first big step. Sharing my experiences today, I'm hoping this might enlighten, inspire or help someone thinking of this as an option. However, we have no right to judge anyone for their decision in this area, so please, my opinions are only based on our current personal situation, and my opinion is of course only relative. So to start at the very beginning, we came to why would we make this choice, and why I've got Ronald McDonald Learning Program there is my son was actually eligible because he missed a lot of school due to medical reasons and also anxiety, that he was eligible for a tutor through the Ronald McDonald Learning Program, but that process meant he had to see their education psychiatrist, who came to me and said, after doing her test, that my son was learning more what he can't do at school than what he can, and that I should consider other alternative schooling for him because it wasn't working out for him. That made me then look into his learning environment, and I realised that yes, he was a bit isolated in the classroom. For one reason was because purely that he was delayed, so he was hearing about things that were a bit further on to his knowledge in the classroom, but also he had full-time aides with him at all times, and that kind of ostracised him, especially in the playground where he was unable to walk around without an aide. They felt that that was the safest way, so he began to refuse school from a very young age, and we did everything we could. We worked very hard with the school to try and keep him. We brought OTs, we had SSGs. I mean, everyone goes through all these things, but in the end it came down to us having to question, how is this constant refusal, anxiety, difficult mornings, how are they affecting him and us as a family in the environment, and also what are the alternatives, what are our options. This was obviously many months later from the Ronald McDonald Learning Program advice, because sometimes it takes time for a penny to drop. So there was a definitive moment when the penny dropped for me personally, because we were trying a mock MRI because my son has some neurological issues, and the mock MRI, the lady asked him to stay still and he couldn't stay still for even 2 seconds, and she pulled him out of the machine and said, we're asking too much of him. And we're asking too much of him resonated with me, and I thought maybe that's right, we are. School is too much for him. And that was when I finally made that first step and decision to find a better way for my son to learn. The reason I've put the little certificate and the clock there is because I think we're all under this time pressure that society's created, that by a certain age our child will have achieved a certain certificate, and that's always in the back of your mind when you're thinking about school and learning and how far they can grow. So now that we've made the definitive decision to look at alternate schooling, we have to look at what educational options are out there. I did a lot of research for special schools. Unfortunately, they weren't applicable to my son because he sits in an advocacy area of level when it comes to speech. His speech is 75. It's supposed to be 70 or under for certain special schools. And his IQ was around 85, which is also too high for special schools, but less than 100 up, which is required for a general school. We could have homeschooled through the actual school with the Victorian curriculum. That was an option. We could have done it independently by just choosing units and doing it ourselves. We could unschool, which is a radical measure that I've been reading a lot about in America. That they seem to be leading the way on that. And that's a fascinating thing. However, wasn't really a good idea for us because we felt like still some learning had to be done. We were also offered partial school where he could possibly attend part-time schooling and like do 1 or 2 subjects in the school environment. And that was something that we definitely thought might be a good idea, but it also meant that then we had to do all the rest of the curriculum within that framework, which wasn't going to work for us. So the little diagram I had here is about the fact that this what area is quite a lot of research. There is, you have to look into it. You have to find what's available, what's applicable. You have to analyse it. You have to then see if it's actually going to work within your family, within your lifestyle, within your working environment, everything. And of course, documenting things is something we'll talk about a bit further. So once we came to the idea that independent homeschooling was our option of what we wanted to do, we then had to go through the formalities of applying through the VRQA, which is the Victoria's Education and Training Regulator. We found that it was a very easy process. They've got plenty of tools and resources on their website. When it came to supporting documents, it wasn't the usual nightmare for what we go through when it comes to NDIS and special needs situations. It was actually just basically proving who the guardian is and the child's identity. They then show you the lesson plan, examples of lesson plans and the units that need to be covered, so it can help you plan and understand what units and what teachings have to be covered at all the different levels. The word exemptions is there because there are 7 units, which you'll see in a moment, and you are able to apply for exemptions if for some reason you don't think your child is going to be able to do a certain unit for any reason, which in my case we did ask for exemption of languages because we felt that learning the English language was a priority, and we didn't really want to confuse matters with other languages at this point, and that exemption was approved. Then there's the other thing is whether you're eligible or not for isolated education payment, which is a Centrelink fund for people who homeschool. We will go further into that in a moment. So to now we've talked about the why, what and how, but there is a warning at this juncture because I have called this modus operandi, which is what are people's motives? And the reason is this is a beware situation. There's going to be people who strongly disagree with your choice and maybe even create roadblocks. These include GPs, paediatric specialists, school, family, friends, community and cultural associations. Basically everybody you know will have an opinion about this. I guess you just need to ask yourself, what is their motivation? Are they qualified to have an opinion? And even people with the best intentions may sometimes have ideals that are either dated or perhaps a little bit ignorant. But ultimately, these are things you need to overcome, because once you make a choice, you have to stick to it. And we definitely had this problem and still do in certain areas, and it's just all part of, you know, a choice, and it's our choice, and everybody needs to respect people's choices. So while my son was in the school environment, he was the school was receiving a payment of $60,000 a year to support him in that environment, in the public school environment. It was an inclusion fee for his aides. Unfortunately, when you apply for funding for homeschooling for the isolated payment, it's only about $4,000 a year, and it comes in 4 payments. So the difference is quite big as far as how much the government's willing to support families that have been led to homeschooling. What I do want to point out is there are 3 different actual areas that affect how our child learns, being a child with special needs. And we do have to break it up because we have different ways of teaching. So there are 2 focused learning areas. That's how I've broken it up. One is academic, and that's all to do with education and the homeschooling. And then there's independence training, which comes down with respite workers and OTs, physios, all the allied health that support him, and that goes under the NDIS. So we're pretty much managing the 3 different areas: education, health and disability support, but ultimately they all impact on learning. They're all areas that impact on my son's learning. So now that we're set up to homeschool our son, we had to look at how our homeschooling goals, how we're going to achieve these homeschooling things. This is where the second penny dropped for me. I realised the curriculum has to be tailored to our child's learning needs, and there are challenges on teaching a child with special needs. I've written some of those, certainly not all, in our position. And the reason I've put the stop sign there is because, sometimes they stop things from happening, other times they don't. So everything from concentration problems, difficulty retaining information, unable at times to complete or even begin tasks, experiencing sensory tantrums, trust issues and mass anxiety around new people, restless, fatigue, body needs to regulate. There's defiance, there's frustration, implosion, explosion. There's a problem when asking too many questions, and at times my son will just choose to become selectively mute. What I've put here is a gentleman teaching us with a book and a pill that there's an answer for this, but there actually isn't. So this is a wish situation. You go about teaching a child with special needs. So this is a little shopping cart, because this is what you have to do. You have to gather resources. I've changed the way we learn. Everything's activity-based learning. Everything's associated to the environment. We look at different cultural situations. We have free learning, where the choice of what to learn about comes from him. There's plenty of resources everywhere. There's a slight issue with resources, though, because he's quite advanced in his, social situations. So when it comes to learning from books that are at his level, they really don't talk about things that are of his interest. Like, he certainly doesn't care anymore that Jack and Jill went up the hill. He'd rather hear about Roblox or what's going on with the Aboriginal culture, or things that he's more interested in. We learn a lot through daily tasks. We have weekly projects that we put together. There's a lot of social events that we put together. We're trying to record a lot of this with journals and photographs, and we also access external educators and programs. This hasn't been that easy, but I'm still working on all different ideas. We've had quite a few attempts at things that haven't worked out, but you've got to keep trying, and you've got to keep finding creative ways to do things. There's a lesson in everything in life, from looking at the sky to going shopping. You can make a lesson out of that, and we've been doing that, but also we have been guided on how to do that, and I'll talk more about that. So this is like a typical week's plan and daily plan for our homeschool life. We try and come up with different activities each day. So every weekday there's something that's going to be looking forward to that's happening. And on the weekends we do a lot of social activities with his friends. But on the daily plan we have a pretty definitive schedule that we do our best to stick to. But learning is 24/7 because there's so many opportunities to engage in an activity or nurture an interest or introduce a new concept or ideas. There are moments of learning. Scheduling is a guide that we're trying to stick to, but there are also a lot of implicating factors, from medical to allied health appointments. There's a lot of other things that sometimes step in a way of having a very strict timeline and schedule. We need that flexibility, and that works for us. So when I was talking earlier about the 7 units, I've put them up here on the screen. What happens when it comes to assessing? How do I assess my son's progress? Now, there's a thing called summative assessment, which includes using tests and quizzes. But when you can't ask questions, those kind of tests aren't really practical to do. So instead we have to look at formative assessments. We try, I do my best to guide. We get his input, we get his feedback, we reflect, and we have goals. And the goals are what we treat as our units. We kind of flip it around, and the way we assess things is we see milestones. There's awareness of his learning, and that is rewarding for him as well. This link that I have here is a very important resource for me, which is what I use to try and gauge what level he's at, what things he needs to be learning at what level, because it does tell you literally in detail what every child needs to know at each level. Certain things are actually impossible because of his condition, that he will probably never be able to retain those kind of informations, but you can just, rather than be disheartened, work through the things that he can do and make sure that he learns them, and also really practice the things that might be a bit tricky and that might take a lot longer to achieve. So the way this works best for us is this is how we split the units by topic, as opposed to doing a unit each. In each lesson we actually do a topic which covers several units. For example, on the left of this screen we have the olives that we prepared and made. This was quite a great lesson because it gave us the opportunity first to pick the olives off the tree. We watched them grow, we waited for them to ripen, and then once we pulled them off the tree we had to separate the green ones to the darker ones, and we did some counting, we did some research on what to do with them. We used technology to do the research. We looked at all the different sciences, as far as we've been sitting the olives in water and refreshing the water every couple of days and watching the elements and what goes on while they ripen, and trying to understand why they're not actually, because they're in water, there's no oxygen, so they're not actually going off. Anyway, there's some of the lessons we're learning, and there's a lot of counting olives and counting jars, and then we imagine if we were to sell them how much we would get per jar, and then how much it costs us in time to make them. So we're trying to look at business models there as well, I guess. But then we also have music, which is an arts, and music is very similar to maths. There's a lot of maths in music. They're learning where the keys are, learning the different letters, and understanding a bit about the history of music and where the songs come from. And in this case, the technology is from the 80s. So we're learning about the technology of history. So again, my main mantra is not to become too overwhelmed. So when it comes to future planning, that's not that easy to do. Of course, high school is in our sights. We're talking about it, we're thinking about it, we're hoping for it. It's still a couple of years away. And if we were to go down that route, I guess the first question would be, in what capacity would he be able to manage that? And that depends on what we achieve in the next couple of years, whether he'll be able to achieve a part-time schooling option or what options we'll have when he'll be in that situation. So when you've got an undiagnosed child, there's all sorts of evolving situations and milestones that are reached that you might not have thought that your child would ever reach. So it's not like we have a map out of where this is heading. So we do have to literally manage our expectations at the time as well as we can. And then what I've put at the bottom here is assess, prepare, research and plan. And that is something that you have to do at intervals and reassess what your position is. How is this all working out with everybody else, and what is the best possible outcome for my son? So what have I learnt? I learned that our child had no chance for thriving in a general public school environment. In most schools, children learn through disciplinary measures. They're also forced into many competitive situations with their peers and are scored against each other. They're taught that everyone is the same, but the truth is not everyone is the same. Not all people thrive in a competitive environment. Not every discipline is necessary. What is necessary is for children to learn to love themselves and respect themselves and think less of what others might think. From a young age, we are taught to worry what others might think. And that, in my opinion, is the most damaging long-term effect on people. Confidence is everything. If we define our children as lesser than, then so they will be. I refuse to allow that, because there is no limit on what our children can achieve if they're allowed to nurture their own interests, even if they come in forms of obsession. All geniuses from history were obsessive. Obsession is also passion, and passion is what drives, motivates and helps us to thrive. As does it really matter what others think? He was taught to be in an environment that wouldn't accept him. They talk a lot about inclusion in schools when it comes to culture, religion, tradition, but unfortunately, in my opinion, they really lack capacity to manage disabilities or children who are delayed or classed as different. School is okay for those who aren't different. So, in conclusion from all this, as I've made pretty clear, the mainstream weren't equipped for our son, which I think is sad. I hope that's addressed at some point. Making the decision itself was quite a process to homeschool. There are challenges in homeschooling, but rather than become overwhelmed, I think you need to just embrace it. Know that technology is king. There are resources everywhere, as far as you want to look, in every direction. And then you will have some days that you feel like you actually made the wrong decision. You feel like you've gone 2 steps back. But the truth is, my child is thriving, he's happy. It's been an extremely rewarding process. And yeah, that's my big advice, is just to keep things real. You manage realistically your time, and that will help you not stress too much. Definitely stay on top of the formalities when it comes to documenting and keeping the VQRA up to date, and measure growth in whichever way you can in your capacity. And like I said, my son is so much happier. And as a family, we have no regrets. And we wish, in fact, we had done it a lot earlier. That is probably the only regret. Thank you so much for your time today. And I guess if there is a takeaway message, do it your way.
Great presentation, Yael. Thanks very much. I'm sure everybody was tuned into that, and we're looking at a whole range of options. I particularly think it was quite courageous of you, but if things aren't working in the system, then you've got to look for what you can look for and make it work, because this is, your child. You're the one who knows your child the best and can work out the best solutions. So thank you so much for a really interesting presentation. Heather, have we got any questions in chat?
No, we don't, but I do know that we do have a number of SWAN families who have taken their child out of mainstream school because it hasn't been working, and they are homeschooling them. So you're not alone on your journey, even within the SWAN family, Yael. I think, for some people, the option of homeschooling is just overwhelming, and particularly if the parents are trying to work as well, they are thinking, how can I possibly do this? So, you lead by example. You work, you homeschool, you advocate for your children. So I take my hat off to you. Well done. So.
Oh, well, I've got a good partner and their father, and he's there. I can't take all the credit. He does a lot. Oh, he's adulating in the background there. But yeah, it's a team effort, and yeah, it's also like what we've heard from everyone. It really comes down to having the right supports, no matter what they are, in what form. And yeah, I just so, like, honestly, if there's been a family that tried mainstream school, no one tried harder than we did. We really did. It was crazy what we did, and now we look back and go, why did we not make that choice earlier? But you can't regret what you've done. We were just trying to do the best for our family, and from what we knew, because you only know so much of what you're told. And once we realized there were other options, unfortunately it also comes down to what's available in your local area. And I certainly wish I lived where Sue lives with Lucy, because that sounds like the most embracing, beautiful community. And I was so grateful to hear. Thank you, Sue, if you're listening. I was grateful to hear your story.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Yael. Have a great rest of the day if you're going to join us, or I'm sure you'll pop in and out. Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Okay. Bye.